Hello, as you can probably realise, I'm recording this at a slightly different time than I recorded the previous one. Mainly because lots and lots of directing, and then lots of wind, so lots of stuff which had to be tied down, and lots of other weird stuff. So, welcome to part 2 of the Supemarines of the Interwar years, and this is the part which has the things which is probably going to introduce the most interest the engineering viewers the most, and interest everyone, I hope, if I get it right. But it will interest the engineering orientated ones the most, probably. Now, here's the thing. Before we begin, it's worth trying to pick out some similarities between Supemarine and a modern company. And it's worth remembering that Supemarine certainly never forget that they have the Marine as part of their name. In fact, one can say they're fairly darn obsessed with it. What they aren't obsessed with, and are certainly slightly worried by in many ways, is consistency and the idea of staying in one space. Now, why can I say this? Because there consistently comes from the marine side. Flying boats, float planes, that is what they are focusing on. That is what they are building. But whereas their money and their income certainly comes from longer range aircraft, larger aircraft, they keep consistently pouring money into the Schneider Cup and various other things, and pushing ahead. They're kind of like Tesla, who've got a steady car company going now. Boy, not that keen on any of the designs. I was hopeful for the truck, strange enough, because I thought that would have enough space in the boot for a historian to move around and move large dogs with them, but no, it doesn't look like it would work. So, looks like it's a Toyota Hilux or a Subaru Forester for my next car. Leaving that to one side, though, what Tesla also do are these huge projects like the massive battery farm they build, or capacitor sort of farm, in Australia. Very advanced technology. And why am I saying this? Well, the more I study, the more I think about Supemarine as an organization, the more I'm reminded of what Steve George has said in Bilge Bumps, which was that every time you take off in an aircraft, you are doing Formula One level engineering. That it is that. Well, if you're doing Formula One level engineering just to take off, then what are you doing in terms of level of engineering to do the Formula One equivalent in a Formula One equivalent already organization? It's kind of like the Tribal Class Destroyers elite of the elite in terms of the Royal Navy small ship forces. It's the same when you're looking at the Schneider Cup. You are looking at the elite of the elite. You are looking at the companies which are at the pinnacle of technology and innovation. And Supemarine wins that competition 4 times. They, in fact, win that trophy as many times as Italy wins it. If S4, which we'll be looking at today, hadn't blown up, they could well have won it 5 times. In fact, probably should have, but it doesn't blow up, it has wing flutter. wings aren't capable of the wooden wings aren't capable of dealing with the speed it's able to go. Develops flutter. Now let's think about that. Yes, they still wouldn't have equaled the country which has won the most, but that's because that's Britain, which they represent. And Britain already had a win in the bag before they started taking part, so Britain was always going to be one ahead of them. Britain, if it had won 6 times, would have been... well, that would have been one less win for Italy. So both Italy, if Britain had won one more time, it would have equaled every other nation's winning combined. So the 3 Italian ones that have been left, the French and the 2 United States. And of those, the majority of times would have been Supemarine. They would have got more than any other country involved other than Britain. So the S4 is really pinnacle in that the average speed of the Macchi is 246 miles per hour. S4 could do faster than that. And then you consider the fact that Supemarine have won it 4 times, as I said. No other company comes close. Yet, this is a company for whom aircraft like this are the bread and butter. Meet the Swan. It's an interesting aircraft. It's powered by a Napier Lion, 2 of them. It has a length of 14.7 meters. It has a wingspan of 20.9 meters and a height of 5.57 meters. And it's produced at the same time as the Scylla is, which was supposed to replace the Royal Air Force's Felix Stowe F5s, and the Swan was supposed to be the civilian model. And to save money, and also because they prefer it, and because the Swan is weird looking, it's got a humpback. I mean, it's not Blackburn level of weird or Avro Bison level of weird, but it's got a hunchback. I never thought a seaplane could look like that in terms of wrong in some ways, but it does. That's why I've chosen this picture. You can't see the humpback that well. But what does happen is this evolves from it. The Southampton, which is bigger, well, it's 22.86 meters long span. It's a 15 meter plus length. And don't get me started on its weight. Its maximum takeoff weight is 18,000 pounds or 8 and a bit tons. Actually, it's slightly lighter empty than the Swan was, but it's heavier when it's fully loaded. It can carry 3 Lewis guns and up to 1,000 pounds, well, lower 1,000 pounds of bombs. And it serves with oh so many people. What I love is you can really tell that this aircraft is a seaplane. Because she has waist gun. She doesn't have waist gunners. She has gunners amidships. Ah. What's cool about the Southamptons is they get used as the RAF version of the sloop diplomacy, in that a set of 4 of them have their guns stripped off, have their fuel tanks changed for special tin fuel tanks, which are both bigger and stronger, and they do long-range visits to places and wave the flag. That's pretty much all they can do. They've had all their guns taken off. But basically, it's kind of like a sloop turning up in that. Hello, little sloop. Hello. You have a 4-inch pop-pop. I do. You can do absolutely nothing to anything. I know. But you're here. So I have to acknowledge that you can get here. And I have to treat you politely and interact with you, which is good because it builds a relationship. And the thing is, if you can get here, then something more powerful can get here. Like one of those ships which carries a lot of aircraft, or has 15-inch guns, or lots of 4.7-inch guns, some torpedoes, and a large group of rather angry individuals. AKA the Royal Australian Navy. Sorry, I couldn't resist it. I love the Royal Australian Navy, but by gum, you should never count them out if you're in a fight against them. Sheer force of will count for a lot. And the Royal Australian Air Force actually plays around with these as well. 2X RAF ones, and they end up in so many ways. The Turks have them. America looks at buying them. All sorts of people different look at them. And these are the sloops of the aircraft world in some respects they use. They turn up and smile. Yeah, this one that's reached me can't do anything to me. But if they'd been coming from not that much closer, the next one could be carrying quite a lot. So, and it's a seaplane, which means that all Britain has to do is move a support ship closer, and they can fly to it, refuel, arm, at sea, well, in a nice protected bay or harbour, and launch their strike. So that's another form of strike from the sea. Of course, Britain in the 1920s and 30s doesn't have a particularly large... Oh, it does. Maybe. Useful capability. Here's the S4, the lovely aircraft, which does look rather like the Macchi, which actually won. That's the glorious red Macchi. I've shown pictures of it in the past. It's a gorgeous aircraft. It has a Napier Lion engine. It has a maximum speed of 239 miles per hour in theory. That's what it's recorded as in time trials before it goes to America. So it sets a record. It does 239 miles an hour maximum speed. And probably someone's going to sit there and go, but the Macchi in 1926, you said it could win, but that was doing 246.49 miles an hour. Yeah. The thing is, when she developed wing flutter, the pilot was doing a practice flight, and there is a debate as to how fast it was being pushed at the time. Now, wing flutter is a form of dynamic instability. and it causes sort of what we sometimes would term positive feedback. Not really positive you're experiencing, and there are various videos of bridges you can watch which are going through it, which explains what this is. But pretty much one of the troubles is that in complex structures, i.e. aircraft, and especially aircraft this time, we can't really fully understand what can cause it, but we do know it requires it to be going significant speed. Very significant speed. Now, the thing is, at 239 miles an hour, she hadn't experienced flutter. And it'd been rock stable. It was well known they were pushing even faster. So one of the more interesting calculations I read, actually not in my Discord, in a Discord. Well, it's going to sound strange. I got a picture sent to me of another Discord, so I'm not sure which server it is. But someone had done a lot of complicated maths, which looked pretty right to my history of engineering eyes. I'm not an engineer, I'm a historian, remember. But to my eyes are looking at, which estimated that for flutter to occur, it must have been doing approximately 250. And that's 11 miles per hour more an hour, but that's not really a lot when you're talking about the tinkering they were doing with the engine and the various other things to try and get more speed, and the obsession, as I've been over before, of the desire for more speed. It's all about speed. And you'll see a classic example of that in some of the following ones, because then after the S4 comes the S5, which wins. Well, hey, that has a Napier Lion 900 horsepower engine. It also has a lot more metal in its structure. Which is why its wing is defined as airfoil RAF 30. That's the pattern they've gone with. And its maximum speed was 319 miles per hour. So think about that. 39 is the recorded speed. We think it was going faster, but 39. I'm fairly certain it was going faster. But the S4 was 239 miles per hour. 319. Again, I'm going to scare you with some maths here. That's an 80 mile per hour jump in 2 years. And that's the winner. Again, these aren't big aircraft. The S4 was 8.12 meters long. The S5 is 7.4 meters long, so it's actually short. The wingspan is 9.3 meters long on the S4. On the S5, it's 8.15. Then we have the S6. This isn't the winning aircraft. It's one of the ones that survived. It's in the Solent Museum. Now, I would like to say that I would fly that slowly. I would probably push that as much as I could just to see how fast I could get it. This I would keep well away from. And even though it won, and it had the airfoil RAF 27 on its design, on its wing shape. Because he shifted to Rolls-Royce. Mitchell does this because he goes and looks at Bristol. He goes and looks at Napier. He decides Napier Lion has run out of development track, and it's just not available. It's just not getting there. So he has a long conversation with himself and decides on Rolls-Royce. The RV12, 1,900 horsepower, and this is at 2,900 RPM for 1 hour. That's not ominous at all. 1 hour maximum revs. I first spotted that on Wikipedia. And then I spotted it in the book. And then I did some digging about what happened to that engine after 1 hour. And it might continue to work. It might decide that rather than being an engine, it is now a small, non-nuclear, but highly explosive and very impressive device. Or it might turn itself into shrapnel as the valve casing, the little injectors, pistons, erupt. Everywhere. It's a highly interesting thing to look up. I haven't yet found the video of that one. Also annoyed that the video that they used to be on YouTube, I think. I'm sure it was on YouTube. Anyway, I used to use it for teaching a long time ago. Of a Merlin engine blowing up. I can't find anymore on the test stand. It was being tested to destruction, which was quite common in these days. It was some of the tests they did on engines. They were quite happy to build an engine, basically set it up on a testing rig and muck around with it till it went sky high just to see what kind of punishment they could do to the thing. Eminently sensible and a lot of fun to watch. 2-bladed fixed pitch propeller. Please note it has a lighting speed of 95 miles per hour. That means landing and taking off. Also, length. Is roughly 8 meters. Wingspan 9 meters. So the wingspan is getting longer than the length. It's a small aircraft. Dense, but small. And then we have the S.6B. Now, what do I want to talk about with this aircraft? Because this wins in 1931. Of course it does. For starters, there is the fact that if anyone knows of a roughly 10 meter by 10 meter shed near a old testing area for seaplanes and float planes, you might want to go check it out. Probably somewhere in the Commonwealth area or possibly in the UK. If it's in the Commonwealth area, it could be in Canada. We don't know where it is. We know the winner is. The winner is in the the Science Museum in South Kensington, along with a trophy. This aircraft, though, the second aircraft, well, we for many years thought one of the S6s which survived was the second S.6B. But we found out a while back it wasn't. So we know it wasn't destroyed in testing. There's no record of it being destroyed in testing. And we know it was used for a while by the Royal Aircraft Establishment before it was moved around somewhere. No one's quite sure where it is. Perhaps BAE have it in a cupboard somewhere. They don't seem to know they do, but there again, BAE have a lot of cupboards inherited from a lot of companies which have managed to end up as part of their overall structure. So, it's not exactly a massive aircraft as well compared to an F-35 or something like that. It could easily fit in a cupboard. But if anyone feels like doing a bit of sleuthing, good luck. And if it wasn't COVID, I would be currently heading down to... there are a few areas where there are still some sheds. I'm sure someone else has already been through them, but that wouldn't stop me going and having a look. You never know. Besides, be a good day out for me and Drac. Might even see if Jamie wants to come over from Australia, or if he can search the Australian with us, because that's another place I suppose it could have ended up. But that's not the really big thing I wanted to talk about with the S.6B. This is how I want to really demonstrate that this is the Formula One of aeroplanes. In World War II, the best engine that Britain has in mass production in 1939 is the 1,000 horsepower, roughly, Merlin. It's a good engine. It's not a great engine, but it's a good engine. When I say it's not a great engine, there are subsequent marks of Merlin which definitely do go into the great category of engines, but the first couple of generations of Merlin, they do have a nice sound. They're better than their competitors, but they aren't what the Merlin becomes. Now, this young lady was sporting something which would be equivalent to a Griffon engine of mid-World War II, 2,350 horsepower at 3,200 RPM. Maximum speed 407.5 miles per hour. Here is the thing. Imagine World War II. If in 1939 the Merlin engine being fitted to all British aircraft is 2,350 horsepower. Let's just say it's 2,000 horsepower. Think about the effect on the Fairey Fulmar and its capabilities. Think about the effect on the Spitfires, the early Spitfires and the early Hurricanes. Think about the effect on the Lancaster bombers and the Wellington bombers. And think about all the aircraft and how they will be impacted by doubling the engine horsepower available to them. And imagine the consequence through World War II. The fact is that 8 years prior to 1939, we have an engine which can do 2,300 horsepower. But the trouble is, to mass produce that engine is... It's such a fettled, such a carefully cared for engine. It's not something you can do that with. It's close. It's the engine which will be developed into the Griffon. So at this point, it's really, really experimental. But we're talking, what, 3 years into the war that the Griffon really starts to come in? So 3 years of World War level development, and 8 years of development prior to that, and probably a couple of years prior to that. So you're talking a decade of peacetime, 3 years of war, to get that from being highly experimental to being a practical, mass-producible unit. It's a cool aircraft, but the really cool thing about this whole thing, it's not the aircraft, it's the engine. 2,350 horsepower. Think about it. Think about the impact on World War II that would have had. And this is 1931. So if you have a reliable 2,000 horsepower engine coming in 1931, well, the Swordfish Swordfish is ordered in 1933. That engine could have been selected for it. Imagine the strike aircraft the RN has if they've got a 2,000 horsepower. And imagine the effect that goes through. Even if it doesn't get into service in 1931, let's say 4 or 5 years later, having a massive impact on World War II. But it doesn't, because these things take time. And because it takes time for it, and I'm going to use a phrase which I really don't like, to trickle down. Now, I have problems with trickle down because it's used in economics and various theories far too often. It's at best a force multiplier in those circumstances. But in terms of technology, it is a great example of what it is, a classic description, because there's the real pinnacle technology, the highly experimental stuff, and there's the practical stuff we can all use. And it takes time for that to translate to that. Mainly because the pilot to run this has to be really, really on it. Watching those fuel mixes, watching everything, because you get a slight error, it will eat you. You have to make sure it's got the right mixture. You have to make sure it's got the right pressure. You have to make sure all the gauges are... It's got very little latitude for forgiveness. And that's what you need in something which is going to be mass-produced. It needs to forgive its pilot. It needs to have that latitude. And building that latitude in, while providing that amount of horsepower, that amount of power, is what takes the time. Right. So, I hope you've enjoyed part 2 of 3. If you have, then please consider liking, maybe even subscribing, perhaps even pressing the little bell down there. Come join us on Discord, or on, if you're feeling very generous and want to support me in my very expensive book habit, Patreon. Thank you very much to everyone who's watched this, and I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll look forward to part 3 of the Long Patrol, which will now be recorded on Wednesday, and I'll probably be wearing a different t-shirt. At least I should be. Thank you. Take care.